I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, sitting here, staring at my computer screen, trying to figure out how to articulate the mess my life has become. My name is Jake, and until recently I thought I had a pretty solid life. I'm 35, married to Sarah, a woman I fell in love with during our college years. We've been married for over 10 years, and I always believed we had a strong relationship. But in the last few months, things started to change. Little things at first, like Sarah being less communicative and more secretive with her phone. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the stress of work. She's a marketing executive and her job can be demanding, to say the least. But then I noticed her coming home later than usual. Sometimes she'd say she had meetings, but I could tell when she was lying. Her words would stumble over each other and her eyes darted away, as if she was avoiding my gaze. I tried to talk to her about it, but she'd always brush me off with a wave of her hand, telling me I was being paranoid. You know how busy my job is, Jake. I swear it's nothing more than work, she'd say, rolling her eyes as if I was being silly. I wanted to believe her, but deep down, that gnawing feeling in my gut told me something was off. Everything came crashing down one Tuesday evening. I came home early from work, looking forward to having dinner together. I was excited and even picked up her favorite takeout on the way, thinking it would be a nice surprise. But when I walked into our apartment, it was eerily quiet. I called out for her, but there was no response. The living room looked normal, except for the fact that her purse was thrown on the couch, something she would never do. I glanced over at our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked over to check. As I pushed the door open, I was hit with a sense of dread. The first thing I noticed was the mirror. There, in the middle of it, was a note written in bright pink lipstick. "I can't wait to see you again tonight." XOXO, my heart sank. It wasn't for me. I did know who it was for, but my instinct told me it was for someone else. I felt the room spin around me, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back, trying to process what I was seeing. I must have stood there for a good 5 minutes, just frozen in place, replaying the words over and over in my head. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. My mind raced. Who was she seeing? Was it someone from work? I wanted to believe that maybe it was a joke, some kind of harmless prank. But the reality was sinking in hard and fast. This was my wife, the woman I thought I knew inside out, the woman I had built a life with. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I decided to confront her the moment she walked through the door. I was a mess of emotions, adrenaline pumping through me like a runaway train. When she finally came home, she looked surprised to see me there, especially with the takeout still in my hands. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk," I said, and I could see the color drain from her face. "Jake, I was going to tell you," she started, but I wasn't having any of it. I cut her off, holding up the note as evidence. Her initial shock turned into defiance. She tried to laugh it off, claiming it was just a joke from some friends. I could see her eyes darting, the panic rising in her. "You're being ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything," she exclaimed, but I wasn't buying it. The betrayal hung heavy in the air, and no matter what she said, those words on the mirror wouldn't leave my mind. I felt like I was in a fog, my heart pounding as she tried to explain herself. "I swear it's not what you think," she pleaded, but I could see the cracks in her facade. I was angry, hurt, and confused. How could she do this to us, to our life together? The confrontation escalated, filled with accusations and tears, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. No matter what she said, the trust was shattered, and a part of me knew I had to figure out my next steps. This was only the beginning of a long and painful journey ahead, and I had no idea how to navigate it. My heart was heavy with the realization that my marriage was crumbling before my eyes, and I felt utterly powerless. How could someone I loved so deeply betray me in such a fundamental way? I spent that night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge, of sorrow, and of a future that felt bleak and uncertain. Nothing felt stable anymore, and I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I had to decide what to do next. The thought of revenge felt intoxicating, but another part of me wanted to understand why this had happened. What had I missed? What could I do to salvage what was left? This was the beginning of the end, and I could feel the weight of the decisions I was about to make. Would my heart lead me to forgiveness, or would it push me toward a path of anger and retribution? Only time would tell. After that night, I felt like a ghost in my own home. The air was thick with tension, and every corner of our apartment seemed to whisper reminders of the life we once had. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of daily life while my mind replayed every moment of that confrontation with Sarah. The note on the mirror had shattered something deep within me, and I found it hard to see her the same way again. I started noticing even more changes in her behavior. Sarah was more distant, and her laughter, which used to fill the room, was now replaced with a forced smile. She seemed to be busy all the time, and I suspected she was texting someone behind my back. Whenever I walked into the room, she would quickly put her phone down, and it felt like I was intruding on some secret world I wasn't a part of anymore. One evening, I decided to do some digging. I knew it was wrong, but curiosity pushed me to the edge. I had never been the type to invade someone's privacy, but desperation clouded my judgment. I waited until she was out for a run and grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter. My heart raced as I unlocked it, my fingers shaking. The text messages were a mix of mundane and alarming work-related chats, memes, and then a series of messages that made my stomach churn. Can't wait to see you later. Last night was amazing. Are you sure we can't meet again this week? Each message felt like a dagger to my heart. I was reading conversations that were filled with intimacy, passion, and secrecy, things that should have been mine to share with her. My anger bubbled to the surface, and I could feel the hot flush of betrayal rise to my cheeks. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I forced myself to take a step back. Instead of honorably confronting her, I decided that I needed a plan. I felt trapped in a web of deceit, and I needed to find a way to regain control of my life. The thought of revenge began to take shape in my mind. Nothing too drastic, no destructive measures, but I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions. I wanted her to understand the kind of pain she was putting me through. I started playing the part of the dutiful husband while secretly gathering evidence of her betrayal. I began to document everything: the late nights, the missed calls, the secretive glances. I even enlisted a friend, Matt, to help me out. He was a private investigator by trade, and I figured he could help me gather intel without raising suspicion. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in our home grew unbearable. Sarah continued to deny anything was wrong whenever I tried to talk about our relationship, insisting that I was imagining things. I played along, pretending to be the oblivious husband, all the while feeling more and more suffocated by her lies. It was a twisted game we were both playing, and I felt like I was losing ground with every passing day. One Friday evening, I decided to push my plan into action. I had been tipped off by Matt that he had seen Sarah leaving a bar with another man, a tall guy with dark hair, someone I didn't recognize. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal wash over me. How could she be so brazen? It was time to confront her with the evidence I had gathered. I knew I had to make it clear that I was aware of her actions and that they wouldn't go unpunished. I waited for her to come home, packing the living room as I rehearsed what I would say. When she finally walked in, her face lit up with surprise at the sight of me. "Hey babe, you're home early," she exclaimed, her cheeriness feeling like a slap in the face. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered, and I could see a flicker of fear in her eyes. "About what?" she asked, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her tone. I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone. "I know about him, Sarah. I know you've been seeing someone else." I hit send on a text I had written to Matt, a simple "Do you have the photos?" and I watched as her face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, but I could see the panic rising in her. I didn't let her dodge the conversation this time. I started throwing the evidence at her: the text messages, the late nights, the whispers. "You want to keep lying? Go ahead, but I'm done being your fool. You think I do know. You've been seeing someone else, haven't you?" Her composure cracked as she desperately tried to deny everything, claiming it was just harmless fun, that I was overreacting. "It meant nothing, Jake. You have to believe me." I felt a mix of anger and sorrow at her excuses. The woman I had married was a stranger now, As she stood there trying to manipulate the situation, I realized just how far she had fallen. This wasn't the relationship I wanted, and at that moment I made a decision that would change everything. I told her I needed time to think and that I wasn't sure what our future held. I had no idea how to move forward, but I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic space any longer. The emotional toll was too great, and I needed a moment to process everything. With that, I left the room and walked out into the cool night air, my heart pounding. The weight of betrayal felt heavier than ever, but I also felt a strange sense of freedom. I was no longer going to be the victim in this story. I was ready to take action. It was time for revenge. The nights that followed that confrontation were some of the most tormenting of my life. I moved into the spare bedroom, a temporary refuge from the chaos that my marriage had become. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment, every word exchanged with Sarah. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, but so did a deep sadness. I still loved her, or at least the idea of her, the woman I thought I married, but the truth was that she had strayed so far from that image. As I lay awake, I devised my plan. I wanted Sarah to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the pain she had inflicted on me. But I also wanted to gather the evidence that would make it impossible for her to deny the truth anymore. That's when I decided to use Matt to my advantage. He'd been a good friend, and his experience as a private investigator could be pivotal in uncovering the full extent of Sarah's betrayal. I called him the next day. "Matt, I need your help. I think she's seeing someone named Kyle, and I need to know everything I can about him. I want you to follow her. Get some pictures, figure out what they're up to." "Are you sure you want to go down this road, Jake?" he asked, his voice steady. "It can get messy. I need to know the truth. I can't go on living in this fog, waiting for her to come clean. I want to confront her again, but this time I want solid proof. No more lies." Matt agreed and promised to keep me updated. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, as if I had finally taken the first step on a path to reclaiming my life. As the days passed, I continued to play the role of the unsuspecting husband, going to work and maintaining a facade of normalcy. But inside, I was a cauldron of emotions, boiling over with resentment and the desire for retribution. That Friday evening, Matt called me. "Hey, I have the photos you asked for. You're not going to like what I found." My heart raced. "What do you mean?" "I followed her to a bar last night. She was there with Kyle, and they definitely looked more than just friends. I've got shots of them leaving together, walking close, laughing. It's all in the pictures." I felt a mix of anger and heartbreak. "Send them to me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I stared at the photos, my pulse quickening as I saw Sarah leaning into Kyle's personal space, their bodies close as they shared secrets only they were meant to hear. My heart sank as I scrolled through the images, her laughing, touching his arm, and then the final blow, a photo of them sharing a kiss outside the bar. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The betrayal was raw and visceral. I could hardly breathe. This wasn't just a fling, this was a full-blown affair, and I had been blind to it all. The rage bubbled up again, hotter than before, and I knew what I had to do. I called Sarah and told her I wanted to talk. She sounded apprehensive, but I assured her it was important. When she walked in, I had the pictures laid out on the table, a visual representation of her betrayal. Her eyes widened as she took in the images, and for a moment I felt a flicker of satisfaction. She had nowhere to hide now. "What the hell is this, Jake?" she asked, her voice shaky but defensive. "You've been spying on me." "This is you, Sarah. This is you and Kyle. Don't pretend it's not real. You can't talk your way out of this one." Her expression shifted from shock to anger, and I could see her scrambling for words. "Okay, fine. Maybe I went out with him a few times, but it didn't mean anything. It was just fun. You've been so distant, and I needed someone to talk to." "Someone to talk to?" I echoed, incredulous. "That's your excuse. You thought it was okay to go behind my back and cheat on me. You think that's justified." "I just needed a break. You were always working late, and I felt so alone." She countered, her voice rising, but it was too late for her excuses. The damage was done, and I felt my heart harden with every word she spoke. "Alone?" I asked, incredulous. "You decided to sleep with someone else instead of talking to me. You could have come to me, Sarah. We could have worked on things, but you chose to betray me." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. Stop, I'm done listening to your lies. You've made your choice and now it's time for mine. I want a divorce. Her face twisted in disbelief. You can't be serious. We can work this out. I can change, I swear. But I was resolute. No, you made your choice and now I'm making mine. I won't be with someone who doesn't respect me or our marriage. I deserve better than this. As she stood there, tears streaming down her face, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was angry, yes, but there was also a sense of relief. I was finally taking control. The years of feeling inadequate and unworthy were slipping away. I walked away from the table, leaving her to process the reality of her actions. I could feel the weight of the betrayal still clinging to me, but I also felt empowered. I had made my decision, and now the next steps lay ahead. I knew I would need to consult with a lawyer, figure out the logistics of separating our lives, and start. Process of healing. That night I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls that had once felt so comforting. I had loved Sarah deeply, but the love I once knew had been tainted. The journey ahead would be painful and complicated, but as I reflected on everything that had happened, I knew I was finally on the right path. The road to healing would be long, but I was ready to face it. I would reclaim my life piece by piece. It was time to let go of the past and build something new, something better. The days following my confrontation with Sarah were a blur. I had officially made the decision to pursue a divorce, but the reality of it felt surreal, like I was walking through a fog that wouldn't lift. I set up an appointment with a lawyer to discuss the next steps, and even that felt like a monumental task. The thought of diving into the legalities of ending my marriage was daunting, but I knew I had to face it head-on. I met with a lawyer named Rachel, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had seen it all. She laid out the process for me with a mix of compassion and professionalism. "Divorce can be messy, Jake," she said, her tone serious. "You need to be prepared for the emotional and financial implications. It's not just about ending the marriage, it's about untangling your lives." I nodded, taking in everything she said. "I just want to make sure I do this right. I don't want to lose everything I've worked for." Rachel understood. She explained the division of assets, shared accounts, and custody arrangements if we had children, which thankfully we didn't. Hearing all of this made the reality of the situation hit me even harder. I had to gather all the financial documents, pay stubs, and any evidence of Sarah's infidelity to strengthen my case. When I returned home that day, I felt a mix of determination and dread. I was still residing in the spare bedroom while Sarah tried to make sense of what was happening. It was awkward. We shared a home, but were practically strangers navigating through a minefield of unresolved feelings. One evening, I overheard her on the phone, talking to someone. "I never meant for it to get this far," said, her voice breaking. I thought he wouldn't find out. I felt a rush of anger hearing her minimize what she had done. It was clear she wasn't taking full responsibility for her actions, and that infuriated me even more. I decided then and there that I would not let her manipulate the situation. I had to be strong and keep my emotions in check, even if it meant putting on a brave face every time we were in the same room. As days turned into weeks, the silence between us became deafening. We exchanged minimal words, mostly about logistics, what to do with shared bills, who would take which furniture, and the like. I felt like we were two ships passing in the night, both trying to avoid the wreckage we once called our marriage. Meanwhile, I kept in touch with Matt, who was still gathering evidence. One day he called me with updates. "I've got more info on Kyle. He's got a history of this sort of thing, dating married women. You need to be careful with how you handle this. He might not be the type to back off easily." I felt a wave of anger wash over me again. What kind of guy goes after another man's wife? What kind of scum? Matt chuckled, "The kind that doesn't care about the consequences. Just remember, you're doing this for you. You have every right to stand up for yourself. Keep your head up." I appreciated his support. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in this battle. I didn't have to face Sarah and her lies all by myself. Armed with the evidence Matt had collected, I felt empowered. I was ready to confront her again, this time with the full knowledge of the lengths she had gone to betray me. One Friday night, I decided it was time for another discussion. I called Sarah into the living room, knowing this would be another turning point. "We need to talk about Kyle," I said, my voice steady. She looked at me, her expression guarded. Jake, I interrupted her. I know you think you can sweet-talk your way out of this, but I have more evidence than just the photos. I know everything about him. I know his history. Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw a flicker of genuine concern. What are you talking about? I laid it all out for her, detailing what I knew about Kyle and his past relationships with other married women. You're not the first, Sarah. He's done this before. He's a predator preying on vulnerable women, and you fell for it. I didn't know, she protested, her voice rising again. How was I supposed to know? I just needed someone who cared. And you thought cheating was the answer? I asked, my patience wearing thin. You didn't think to talk to me. You didn't think to try and fix our marriage. I was confused, Jake. We were in such a bad place. She shouted, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Confused? No, you were selfish. I shot back. You threw away everything we built together because you couldn't communicate. You chose to betray me when I would have fought for us. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. The silence that followed was heavy. I could see her struggling to process everything I was saying. I felt a sense of relief washing over me. I was finally standing up for myself, but I also felt a pang of sadness as I realized this was the end of us, the end of everything we had once meant to each other. I'm filing for divorce, and I don't want to talk about this anymore, I stated firmly. You need to start thinking about how you'll manage without me. Her response was silent tears, and I turned away, feeling the weight of the moment settle in my chest. That night, as I lay in bed, I found it hard to sleep. I felt a mix of liberation and sorrow. There was no going back to what we had, too much had been broken. But I also felt like I was finally on the right path, reclaiming my life and my dignity. I had made it clear that I wouldn't be a victim of her deceit, and as painful as it was, I knew that I had to keep moving forward. I could take the next steps to heal and rebuild my life piece by piece. I was ready for this new chapter, ready to embrace whatever came next, even amidst the heartache. It felt like I was shedding an old skin, preparing for something new, something better. And finally, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. The months that followed my decision to file for divorce were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and logistical challenges. I had plunged into the deep end of legal processes, navigating through paperwork, mediation, and the unsettling reality of separating our lives. At times, it felt overwhelming, but I kept reminding myself that I was taking control of my future, and that motivated me to push through. Rachel, my lawyer, was a tremendous help, guiding me through each step of the process with a level-headedness that I desperately needed. We discussed division of assets, and I began to gather everything we had built together: bank statements, property deeds, and even our shared debts. Each document felt like a reminder of the life we once had, and it was hard not to feel a pang of nostalgia for the good times we'd shared. But with every piece of evidence I compiled, I also felt a sense of empowerment. I was finally reclaiming my life. When it came to informing Sarah about the filing, I was both anxious and resolute. I chose a quiet evening when the tension had somewhat eased between us. I figured it would be best to keep the conversation civil, despite the emotional storm that lay beneath the surface. We were still sharing the apartment, but our interactions were minimal, mostly revolving around logistical discussions. Sarah, I began, my voice steady. I need to talk to you about the divorce filing. It's happening, and there's no turning back. She looked up from her spot on the couch, the flicker of a television casting shadows across her face. I already know, she said, her voice flat, devoid of the urgency I had expected. Surprised at her nonchalance, I pressed further. You know, do you even care? Of course I care, this is just hard. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a fleeting moment I felt a tug at my heart, but I quickly reminded myself of the betrayal that had shattered my trust. We both know this was your choice, Sarah, I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. You chose to cheat, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me into feeling guilty for wanting to end this. I'm not trying to manipulate you. She shot back, a hint of desperation creeping into her voice. I'm just saying I regret everything. I wish I could take it back. I shook my head, feeling the familiar anger rise. Wishing doesn't change the reality of what you did. You had so many chances to be honest with me, and you chose deceit instead. I won't forget that. She fell silent, and I could see the weight of my words settling in the room. "What happens next?" she finally asked, her tone softer. "We'll go through the courts," I replied. "We'll need to divide everything and figure out the logistics, including the apartment. I want to make this as fair as possible, but I won't be pushed around anymore." She nodded, looking defeated. I could see the change in her. The woman who had once been so defiant was now a shadow of her former self. As painful as it was, I felt a sense of closure. I needed to allow myself to move forward without the burden of her betrayal hanging over me. As the days turned into weeks, I continued meeting with Rachel and preparing for mediation. It was a daunting task, but I kept reminding myself that I was doing this for my own well-being. In the midst of the chaos, I also took time to focus on myself. I rediscovered hobbies I had set aside during our marriage, like painting and hiking. I found solace in expressing my emotions through art, and each stroke of the brush felt like a release, a way to heal the wounds that had been inflicted on my heart. But there were still moments when I felt the pangs of sadness. I missed the companionship we once shared, the inside jokes, the late-night talks, the simple comfort of having someone there. I had to remind myself that those moments were overshadowed by the lies and betrayal. I had to keep moving forward for my own sake. Ultimately, the day of mediation arrived. I walked into the conference room with a mix of determination and anxiety. Sarah was already there, looking nervous and unsure. We exchanged awkward glances, and I could feel the tension in the air. The mediator introduced herself and laid out the expectations for the session, emphasizing the importance of open communication and compromise. As we began to discuss assets, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was no longer the man who would let his emotions dictate his decisions. I stood my ground, advocating for what I believed was fair, and I was resolute in ensuring that I walked away with what I deserved. Sarah, on the other hand, appeared distressed. She struggled to navigate the discussions, and at times I could see her frustration boiling over. But I remained composed, reminding myself that this was a necessary step in moving on from the pain she had caused. There were moments of heated exchanges, especially when it came to the division of our shared belongings. I found myself fighting to keep the artwork I had created during our marriage, pieces that held sentimental value to me. It was a symbolic representation of my journey and growth, and I was determined not to let go of that part of myself. As the session progressed, I could see Sarah shifting between anger and regret. The mediator encouraged her to express her feelings, and for the first time she seemed vulnerable. "I messed up, Jake," she admitted, her voice quivering. "I never meant for it to get this far. I just wanted to feel wanted again." The honesty in her words caught me off guard, but I quickly reminded myself of the hurt she had inflicted. "You could have communicated that, Sarah. Instead, you chose to betray me. That's not something I can overlook." Tears streamed down her cheeks, and I felt a pang of empathy for the woman I once loved. But I also felt the strength of my resolve. I had to stay focused on myself and my future, no matter how painful it might be to watch her suffer. Eventually, we reached a compromise on the financial matters, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step toward closure. As we signed the documents, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it, the end of a chapter that had caused me so much heartache. After the mediation session, I walked out into the fresh air, feeling lighter. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I knew I was on the right track. I had faced my demons, stood up for myself, and taken control of my life again. I was ready to embrace the new beginnings that awaited me, ready to reclaim my happiness and build a future free of betrayal and deceit. As I walked away from the building, I made a silent promise to myself. I would heal, I would grow, and I would never again allow someone else's actions to define my worth. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready to face whatever came my way with newfound strength. The weeks following mediation were a mix of introspection and newfound freedom. I had signed the divorce papers and watched as the finality of it sank in. I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sadness. On one hand, I was finally free from the weight of my marriage, a marriage that had become toxic and fraught with betrayal. On the other hand, A chapter of my life that held many memories was officially closing, and that was difficult to accept. As I settled into my new routine, I found solace in small things that I had neglected during my marriage. I reconnected with friends, spending more time with them over drinks and catching up on life. My friend Matt became a constant source of support. We'd go hiking on weekends, and I found that being in nature helped clear my mind. It was during one of those hikes that I realized just how far I had come. I was no longer the man who had felt inadequate or deceived. I was reclaiming my identity. One afternoon, while we were hiking a local trail, Matt turned to me, his expression serious. "You know, Jake, this divorce was a blessing in disguise. You're going to come out of this stronger, better than before. You just need to keep pushing forward." His words resonated with me. I had spent so long in a state of confusion and hurt, but now I was beginning to see the light. I started to focus on self-improvement. I enrolled in a painting class, something I had always wanted to try. Art had always been a form of therapy for me, and now I was ready to explore it fully. I found joy in the colors and the creative process, painting my emotions onto the canvas and letting each stroke be a cathartic release. Amidst my healing journey, I encountered moments where the shadows of the past threatened to creep back in. Occasionally, I'd receive a text from Sarah, apologizing and trying to convince me to reconsider. "We can still work this out, Jake. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right." She would write, her words tinged with desperation. Each time, I felt a twinge of sympathy but quickly reminded myself of the reasons I had chosen to leave. I had learned that I could not allow guilt to sway me back into a relationship that had caused me so much pain. I didn't respond to her messages, choosing instead to focus on my own healing. As summer turned into fall, I began to notice a shift in my mindset. I was no longer defined by the betrayal I had endured. I was becoming someone entirely new. I started dating again, albeit cautiously. I wanted to take my time and ensure I was ready to open my heart to someone else. Each date felt like an adventure, and while they weren't always successful, they reminded me that I was worthy of love and connection. It was during one of those dates that I met Emma, a vibrant woman with a contagious laugh and a passion for art. We hit it off immediately, sharing a mutual love for creativity and exploration. With Emma, I found someone who genuinely wanted to understand me, someone who made me feel valued for who I was. It was refreshing and exhilarating, like a breath of fresh air after being trapped in a storm. As the months passed, I found myself falling for her in a way I hadn't thought possible so soon after my divorce. Emma was patient and kind, and she understood my hesitations. We would spend hours talking about our dreams and aspirations, and I felt my heart slowly opening again. I began to realize that not all relationships had to end in betrayal. There was still beauty and potential in love, and it was worth pursuing. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that while the pain of my past was still there, it no longer held me captive. I had transformed that pain into strength. I had confronted my demons, faced the truth of my marriage, and emerged on the other side a better version of myself. As we entered the new year, I found a sense of hope blossoming within me. I was excited about the future, not just the romantic prospects, but also the personal growth I had achieved. I had learned valuable lessons about communication, trust, and most importantly, about self-love. I knew that I would never forget the betrayal of my past, but it had shaped me into someone stronger and more resilient. I felt grateful for the journey, even the painful parts, because they had led me to this moment of clarity and possibility. As I sat down to reflect on everything I had experienced, I felt a surge of emotion. I was learning to embrace life with open arms, ready to face whatever came my way. I understood now that it was not the betrayal that defined me, but how I chose to rise above it that truly mattered. And with that realization, I stepped forward, ready to embrace the new adventures that awaited me. I was no longer a victim of someone else's choices. I was the architect of my own happiness, and I was determined to build a life filled with love, authenticity, and purpose. The pain had shaped me, but it would not define me. The future was bright, and I was ready to seize it.